Well, first of all, we have to take a look at the history of the nuclear posture review in the United States. Nuclear posture review is something that's ordered by a president, usually right when he comes in, but it can be ordered at any time it needs to be done. It's how the community examines, what the posture of the United States will be regarding nuclear weapons. It used to be the United States, maintain nuclear weapons in a purely deterrence mode, meaning, we had weapons, we're ready to use them, but we're only going to use them if we're attacked with nuclear weapons. And then later on, this sort of got modified into we could potentially preempt your attack if we found out about it, but still it's about nuclear. Then it became weapons of mass destruction, especially after Iraq. And then we threw in cyber, said if you attack us with cyber, that threatens our national infrastructure, we could respond with nuclear weapons. So we're expanding the scope and scale. And most recently, the nuclear posture was we can use nuclear weapons anytime we want to for any justification. We don't have to tell you. But it's still the concept was that these are the big nukes, the boomers, the ones that, we focused on when it came to arms control. Tactical nuclear weapons, first of all, they've never really factored into arms control negotiations, and they never really factored into nuclear posture. They were just there in case we ever had to, if we ever went to nuclear war, it gave us some options. But I don't think people thought that we would be starting nuclear war from the bottom up. I think most people thought that when nuclear war comes, it would be an exchange of the big ones. And then at some point in time, whatever surviving ground forces could use tactical nukes in the final spasm of death. This is why we reduced our tactical nuclear arsenal, because it really just didn't make any sense to have these weapons, especially when you're spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year on, seeking to maintain and sustain a conventional military superiority, or in some cases supremacy. This is why we spend all that money on those high-tech weapons. And part of that, our plan was to, we sought to intimidate people. I mean, when you park an aircraft carrier off the shore of a potentially hostile nation, what you're saying is we can strike you anywhere we want using our aircraft, and our aircraft can avoid your air defenses by using standoff weapons. And if you fire anything at us, we'll shoot them down with our superior missile interception capabilities. The notion is that we had this technological supremacy, and so most nations would be intimidated into doing nothing. And if nations did choose to stand up to us, we would come in with a massive spasm of violence, hitting them with all this high-tech stuff, shock and awe, and they would just crumble and go away. And this was the goal. And, this is, frankly speaking, let's look at Europe. There was a time when, remember early on when the Europeans, the United States, manufactured the lie that Russia was getting ready to use a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine. The response from Europe wasn't going to be nuclear weapons. What they told the Russians is, we will hit you with precision long-range standoff strike weapons that'll go into the depth of you, and we're going to knock you out like you've never been knocked out before. It'll be purely conventional, but we're going to hit you so hard, you're going to regret ever using a nuclear weapon against Kiev, so don't do it. And that's sort of been our strategy with China, too. You go after the Taiwanese, we're going to hit you with everything. Our long-range standoff weapons are going to take you out across the depth of China. You'll never know what hit you. And if you dare shoot at us, we got all these missile defense things that'll just shoot you down because we're the best. We're better than the rest. That's the posture that's been taken. What's happened? Iran proved all that to be a lie. Not only do we not knock you out with long-range standoff strike weapons, we run out of them very quickly. And when we run out of them, we have no more options. And not only do our missile interceptors not shoot down your missiles, but when we run out of them, it gives you free reign to attack everything. We exhausted the weaponry allocated to the Iran conflict. This is the truth. We exhausted it. Now, you threw up some things about numbers and all that. And Hegseth has been quibbling to the president, because what Hegseth says is we still have sufficient long-range strike weapons and high-quality interceptors to continue this conflict against Iran. And he's not lying, except he's not putting in the bad news. In order to do this, we have to strip Europe and the Pacific literally bare, of their remaining capability. We've already taken them down. I mean, we would through THAAD batteries and Patriot batteries from South Korea and Japan, for God's sakes. But now we're taking down the reserves, the things that are in Guam and all those little ammunition depots in Guam, and then secondary ones in Hawaii. The reserve. This is where we store the munitions that we need in case of war, and those are being drawn down too. The same thing in Europe, being drawn down to the point that if we had a shooting war with Russia and China, we couldn't sustain it. I mean, that big strike that everybody's threatening Russia with couldn't happen today because we don't have the weapons. Even if we did it, it wouldn't work because now we know that the targeting is flawed and the weapons don't do what they're supposed to do and all that kind of stuff. It's all been a bluff. But we can't even bluff anymore. So now the question is, what do you do? We're weak. How do we keep the Chinese and the Russians from exploiting this weakness? Because as you know, the propaganda has been saying that China's ready to attack Taiwan. Some estimates said by the end of this year. And then Russia, of course. So once they win in Ukraine, although they're losing, remember Russia's losing, but once they win in Ukraine, they're going to move on the Baltics, and we have to be prepared for a war in the Baltics. We have to be able to fulfill Chris Donahue's wet dream of taking out Kaliningrad, but we can't because we don't have that. So now what they're doing is they're saying, what do we have? Well, we don't want to go to the boomers right off the bat because that's bad. We'll all die. Why don't we just open up with nukes? It's sort of the Karaganov, philosophy that we've been talking about, where the Russians are saying, let's hit Europe with some nukes early on to send the terror into them. And now the United States is formally, because Vladimir Putin wisely said no to the Karaganov doctrine. He said, no, hell no, we're not doing that. That's crazy. Well, now we know where crazy resides, in Washington, D.C., because we are actively looking at using tactical nuclear weapons early on in any potential conflict to set the scene, to set the stage, to let them know. Let them know what? Because every war game that has ever been played out in the Pentagon, the moment you use one nuclear weapon, it's inevitable that there will be a general nuclear exchange, usually very quickly, and we all die. So this is literally the definition of insanity. The last time we talked about nuclear posture is when the Trump administration, well, actually it was the Biden administration, had to deal with the reality that China was, because of the posture of the United States towards Taiwan, and the threat said, hey, if there's a war, we can take out your pathetic little nuclear arsenal, China. So don't mess with us. And China went, oh, okay, we're just going to modernize and build the DF-41 long-range solid rocket with 10 to 12 warheads on it. We're going to put it in silos. We're building hundreds of silos out west, and we'll just shuffle them around. You have no which one. So if you want to take out our missiles preemptively, you're going to have to hit them with 300 to 400 warheads right up bat, sucking dry everything you got. And we'll still have some left to strike and destroy all your cities. So we're reestablishing deterrence. And the United States is going, wait a minute, no, China's just up the target deck. If we're ever considering a preemptive strike against China, which we were, now we don't have sufficient nuclear weapons to do with that, because if we use all the weapons to take out China, what about Russia with all their nukes? We got to have some left over for Russia, and Russia's expanded their target deck too. So we redid the fusing, and we redid some other things about the nuclear weapons. So we didn't have to allocate 2 weapons per silo. We were saying we're going to hit it with 1 weapon, fancy stuff. So we redid the nuclear strike plan based upon new contingencies. But the good news was, even while this was happening, we still had arms control in place. I mean, what was the complicating factor? New START Treaty and the caps that New START Treaty placed on the number of deployed nuclear weapons the United States could have. And there was the potential that we could have extended it if we continued to talk, to help lower, the risk of unintended consequences. In February of this year, New START went away. There is no more arms control, none whatsoever. There's nobody talking about it. In the United States, you're not even allowed to use the term. The Chinese are like, nah. The Russians are like, hell no. And nobody's talking about it. And now the United States is embarking on the single most dangerous nuclear posture development imaginable. One that says, let's use small nuclear weapons early to set the stage. Set the stage for what? I mean, I wrote a book about it called Highway to Hell. Read it, and you'll see exactly where we're heading on a highway to hell.
Yeah, great points, Scott. I think that's so important. Well, one question to follow up on this then is, do countries like Russia and China and even Iran, let's say, it wasn't mentioned in this particular report, but if the U.S. is considering using tactical nuclear weapons, I guess we can't rule out any theater here. But do these countries view tactical nuclear weapons differently than the big boomers, as you called them? Meaning that would their response somehow be different if they were used than, let's say, if a big boomer was used? Because it seems pretty dangerous to even consider using these, given that Russia and China at least are confirmed nuclear states.
Again, Vladimir Putin, with whom everybody should pay attention to when we speak of Russia's nuclear doctrine, has made it clear that if a single nuclear weapon is used against the soil of Mother Russia, then everybody dies automatically. We won't be the first to use nuclear weapons, he said, but we won't be the second either. Meaning that even though if you launch one, even before it hits, everything's being launched for retaliation because they just assume that this is the beginning of the thing and they're not going to waste time. That's the Russians. The Chinese are very reticent on this, but they haven't done too much public discussion about what their nuclear posture is or what their warfighting plans are. It's always been they will absorb a strike and then retaliate. And they always made sure they have enough to retaliate in a way that they cripple you and destroy you. But how they envision it today, because they've been modernizing, I don't know. What I do know is that the Russians have envisioned the possibility of using nuclear weapons against a non-American target. The Kerriganov doctrine, trading Poznan for Boston, isn't going to be something an American president wants to do. And then, it's still uncertain what Russia and China would do if the United States used tactical nuclear weapons against a non-Russian or Chinese target, since it's taking out Tehran, for instance. And so I do believe that there's a place for tactical nuclear weapons here. Again, it's hard to see what would happen if, for instance, the United States struck Belarus with nuclear weapons. Would Russia's response be to treat it as part of Russia? I think the Union states suggest yes, and in which case you'll get the total deployment. I think that Russia has a legacy nuclear arsenal that dates back to the Cold War, and the Cold War did envision, for instance, tactical nuclear weapons being used in a significant manner for that big push to the Rhine and then on to the Channel that Russia came up with in the late 1970s, early to mid 1980s, 6 days to the Rhine. I think there was nuclear weapons factored into that plan. And the United States, of course, planned on using nuclear weapons to disrupt that. So there was a period of time when both sides envisioned the possibility of a limited nuclear war using tactical nuclear weapons on a European landscape. That always ended up with a general exchange anyways, but at least they start off pretending that we all weren't going to die. Russia inherited this legacy system. I don't think this legacy system actually conforms to Russia's nuclear posture today. But the Russians are loath to give away capability free of charge. These tactical nukes that they have a superiority in terms of numbers. The United States is talking about potentially deploying more B-61 bombs to Europe. And at some point in time, if there's ever arms control, how do you get those B-61s out of Europe? Maybe put the tactical nukes on the table, link them to the French and British nuclear program, something. But so the Russians have things right now that I don't think there's a viable military plan to use. They're there because once you start using nukes, I think it goes straight to the boomers up top. The Chinese, I don't know. I don't know what the Chinese strategy is. Will China, use nuclear weapons against Taiwan? I mean, here's the thing. Russia's not going to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine because Ukraine is an extension of, it's a Slavic country. Taiwan is a Chinese territory. They view it as China. So why would they nuke themselves? So, it's hard to see what the Chinese would do. I would think that if I don't know. I don't know the Chinese thinking. This is why I'd like to talk to the Chinese and get a better idea of what they're thinking. But are they really? to me. But the point is, we just don't know what the Chinese, there are some scenarios they talked about. I think it's a DF-21. They call it a carrier killer. So the idea is that it could either be precision guided into a carrier and sink it with a direct hit from a conventional warhead, or it could use a nuclear weapon and take out the whole carrier battle group. And that might be something that China could consider. But I don't know. I just think it's really dangerous to be talking about using nuclear weapons, because you're never going to contain it. Once it's used, it's all going to be used.
Yeah. Yeah, great points. And all we know about China's policy is no first use. That's been the policy since they tested their first nuclear weapon all the way back in 1964. So, Scott, now to the story on the USS Lincoln, because I wanted your thoughts on how this affects the broader war effort. We know that there are talks right now on the Strait of Hormuz, that's between Iran and Oman, and many are saying the deal is set, and Israeli and U.S. vessels are going to be excluded from being able to cross the strait. At least that's the reports. But then there's this factor that I don't think anyone considers, which is you have the USS Lincoln and these aircraft carriers out there. The USS Lincoln has been out there since January, and now there's all these horrible reports about the personnel out there are worn out by working 7 days a week, some of them. Barely any food that's worth eating, lack of soap, toothpaste, and other amenities, plus holes are showing up in the ship due to wear and tear. What do you make of how does this affect something like this war on Iran that now apparently is going even further south with these talks on the Strait of Hormuz, at least for the United States?
Yeah, I mean, you see that right there? Marines, you're not going to get too much sympathy for me about bad conditions on a ship. You're at war, dude. That's the problem, though. We're not at war. There's no declared war. This is very much a peacetime military. When these sailors went on the cruise, they're expecting a 6-month pop, be home. Family planning's done in regards to this. Maybe the wife and the kids relocated to where the parents are to help, and the kids get put into a school district, but then they're going to be pulled out of the school district based upon the anticipated return time. Vacations are planned. These guys don't make a lot of money, but they're planning vacations in advance. So the wife's bought tickets and hotel rooms, and all of a sudden you're extended, and you're going to, you got to do the refund, the exchange. It's $300 because you went cheap. You didn't buy the insurance, and you lose that money, and now you can't go on it. So morale's shot. The wife leaves. The guy's getting a Dear John letter in the middle of a deployment that's going on forever. And, they weren't really briefed on what they're doing. It's just another, show of force. You're going to launch things. Things are happening. You're not really aware of the totality of the plan. Nobody is. That plan changed 5 times in 10 days early on. What plan are we in? What war are we fighting? Why are we fighting? Wait, there's a ceasefire. We're supposed to go home. No, we're staying. MOU violated. Why are we violating? I thought it was a ceasefire. And this kind of stuff's going on. Instead of just being straight up with the sailors, you're at war. Grow up. So sad, too bad, wouldn't want to be. You shouldn't have raised your hand. But we're at war, and you're going to do your damn job and stop complaining. I want you up in the morning doing your job. I want you at night getting your rest, eat the food when we give it to you. You say you love the food. Thank you, Uncle Sam, for the food, and get back to service. But you only do that when there's an actual war. Instead, we have this peacetime military. I mean, the same thing with the Army. The Marines less so. The Marines pretty hardcore, but even now, the Marine Corps have family. They have the same problems. How do you deploy? When you deploy, what happens to the families? Family support, but things that nobody thought about in World War II. To be honest, you just sent the boys away, and when the war ended, the boys came home. Now we send people out. The sustainment package for a carrier is again based on peacetime modalities. The budgeting. We acquire sustainment packages. They're shipped out to the ship, but now the ship's coming in. We haven't budgeted for an extension. Or if we did, we're robbing it from the next aircraft carrier. We have to pull. This is the problem with going to war with a peacetime force. I mean, this is why Congress has to step up and do its job. Declare war. If you want to go to war against Iran, declare war. But this president comes out and he just makes stuff up, and then we are at war. We're not at war. I mean, what are we at? We don't know. And that leads to confusion. The confusion leads to morale issues. I think if you were very straight with these sailors, we're at war and this is why we're fighting. One of the things that was important, you remember the guy that did the movie It's a Wonderful Life, Frank, not Capra, maybe, famous director. But he got, brought into the military. He was old, but he got brought in, and they said, your job is to make a series of movies. And it's called Why We Fight. You know what the importance of that movie was? When the soldiers went through basic training, they saw the movie, Why We Fight. They sat there, and if somebody asked them the question, why are you fighting? They can answer it now. They saw a propaganda movie that said, this is why we're fighting. This is who the enemy is. This is what our cause are. This is what we're doing. This is why you're being asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. Why we fight. Who's taken the time to do this with the modern sailors? Has anybody sat down? Because, most of the time your leadership is going to be, either going to be some gung-ho guy, and the last thing the sailors want to see is some bald-headed, huge-necked freak up there. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And they're like, screw you. I want to hear it from the boss of bosses. I don't want to hear it from you, testosterone-laden steroid freak. But the boss of bosses are being silent. The president, this is his job as a leader, to sit down and say, this is why we're fighting. This is what it's about. And this is what I expect of you. And this is what I expect of the American people. The American people have your back. It's going to be hard. Long hours. You're at war. I need you to keep the airplanes flying. I need you to keep the bombs being loaded. I need you to keep doing this. And it's going to be tough. We may not get a resupply out to you. They abandoned 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal. The U.S. Navy ran away. And the Marines were sitting there going, wait, where are you going? We need food. We need ammunition. You're on your own. Did they surrender? No. Did they bitch and moan? Of course, they're Marines. But they turned around and they fought. And they continued to fight until the Navy reestablished, lines of supply. That's called war. War is an extreme thing. We have just done a horrible job of preparing the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who are engaged in whatever we're calling this. I think President Trump says it's a military operation, which is funny, just for all the people out there who, again, just a little anecdote. I attended a conference, a video conference, with a group of people who were talking about different issues. And I was talking about Russia's intervention in Ukraine. I called it a special military operation. And somebody intervened and said, how dare you use Putinism? You're speaking the language of Putin. You're speaking the language of an occupier. No, special. I said, but it's called a special military operation for a reason. It's not a war, and I had to explain it to people. But, the reaction in the United States, no, they're at war. Russia illegally invaded. Well, Donald Trump just came out. No, I'm in a military operation. Well, just, Donnie, do us a favor. Just put special in front of it. But, this is where we're at right now. We're not being honest with the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine. And as a result, there's going to be, deficiency. And here's the thing. All it takes is one person of the team to screw up. An aircraft carrier and that's my dog saying, that's right. One person of the team. My team member screwed up. He was supposed to be silent. Now he's got the other team member in. It becomes a cascading effect of dogs barking, interrupting the podcast. But the point is, when you're a team on, especially something like an aircraft carrier, where you're launching and recovering aircraft, you're moving munitions around, you're moving fuel around. Everything is a carefully choreographed operation, and you need discipline. You need to be focused. You need to be locked in. The last thing you need is some guy crying about a Dear John letter, or complaining because I didn't get to eat all the beans and bacon I wanted to eat last night, or the ice cream machine was off, or the toilet smells like it's been used about 1 month longer than it was programmed to be used. And next, a mistake is made. We get an aircraft crash, a pilot dies. Munitions mishandled, which we saw in Vietnam, blows up, the ship sinks. These guys got to be locked in. They got to be focused, and they can't be if they don't understand the mission. They don't believe in the mission, and they can't understand the mission that has been adequately briefed to them. And I think this is the problem, and including the families. The fact that families are communicating and talking back implies there's confusion amongst everybody. The totality of the team is confused. And you just defined this war in a nutshell. Confusion, no teamwork. Hell, the president and the secretary of defense can't even get on the same page when it comes to why we don't have enough munitions.
Yeah. Which to that end, Scott, I'll just pull this up again because I think it's worth reviewing. This is Trump's response to the Washington Post article about not the Washington Post article, but all of the reports that have come out about munitions shortages. The leakers of these treasonous statements are being hunted down. Long-term jail sentences will be sought, and these are the shortages that he's commenting on. 80% of THAAD interceptors, half of Patriot interceptors gone. This is just, Scott, this is just since February 28th.
You understand the small print. You got to read the small print. It says the top 2 variants. Okay, that's the PAC-3, and that's the PAC-2, whatever GMT you want to put on it. Now, why don't we be honest, Mr. President? How many PAC-3s remain? Because that's the only one capable of shooting down a ballistic missile. The GMT can't shoot down anything the Russians bring to bear. So he says that, we got 1,100 left, but that's the 2 most modernized variants. I would say that 80% of that number are the PAC-2 modernized variant that can't shoot down a missile, not a modern missile. So there's probably 150 PAC-3s remaining of that number, maybe 200. This is why when Ukraine said, Mr. President, give us 300 PAC-3s, the president said, no, we don't have any. We don't have any. This is the proof positive. We literally don't have any. And look at the number of THAADs. We're down to